Let's talk about the environmental impacts of Israel's destructive war on Gaza, because destroying over 70% of the houses in an area as densely populated as Gaza, whilst killing over 24,000 people in the process, can't exactly be good for the environment either short-term or long-term. From Israel's indiscriminate bombing campaign to the use of illegal white phosphorus on civilians, many of Israel's weapons and bombs that it uses are actually imported on these massive military aircrafts, mainly from the US. And the environmental impacts of such aircrafts are rarely acknowledged or discussed. So according to a recent report by The Guardian, a large proportion of the 280,000 plus tons of carbon emissions from the first 60 days of the war came from US supply flights and Israeli military aircrafts. The next largest proportion came from Israeli artillery bombs, accounting for roughly 21,000 tons of carbon emissions. And in comparison, Hamas rockets fired into Israel generated roughly 700 tons of carbon emissions, which highlights the asymmetry between each side's war machinery. Additionally, Israel's use of white phosphorus, which is a toxic substance which is illegal to use on civilian areas, not only causes bodily harm and burns, but it also remains in the soil for years, which causes long-term damage and infertility to the land. As a result, Israel has also been accused of ecocide, which is the mass destruction of nature and the environment. There are now growing calls for accountability when it comes to military greenhouse gas emissions, which actually play a pretty big role in the climate crisis, but they're sometimes kept secret or unannounced in annual UN climate action negotiations. And Israel's President Isaac Herzog actually went to the UN COP28 climate summit in Dubai whilst his country was bombing the Gaza Strip. At the COP28 climate summit, no meaningful decisions or action were taken on increasing accountability and transparency when it comes to the arms industry and climate crisis, despite being in the midst of two global conflicts, where Palestinians in Gaza have had to adapt to Israel's restrictions and blockade, resorting to alternative energy sources like solar panels. Israel's indiscriminate bombardment of homes in Gaza has, of course, destroyed such alternative energy sources. And then you have the factor of what it would possibly take to rebuild all of Gaza. A recent calculation of using contemporary construction methods to rebuild Gaza's over 200,000 damaged buildings would generate roughly 30 million metric tons of warming gases. And what other alternative do over 1 million displaced Palestinians have? Israel's Director of Middle East Economic Relations told The Guardian that the question of calculating the greenhouse gas emissions of IDF operations past or present has never actually been discussed.